You're listening to Chicago Stories, a podcast from City Hall featuring the stories of everyday Chicagoans, as told to Mayor Emanuel.
Mayor Emanuel, Chicago Stories. We're joined by Tom Skilling, our great caricature, iconic weatherman, but who has more views on politics than me, which I'm grateful for.
I do.
But let me start. How did you get into climate change? What was there a singular event, or was it a building?
Oh, it's been a building thing.
Oh, yeah?
You know, Mayor, when I used to hear that the Arctic was going to melt and that this warming was going to take place, I thought, you're going to have to prove that to me as a young forecaster. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I've been doing this for about 50 years, and I see the atmosphere doing things I never had seen it do before. For anybody at this stage of the game to have their heads so deeply planted in the sand that they
I got 5 people you can tell that to.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think the same 5 you have.
Exactly. It's amazing to me that anybody could question what's going on. We've got some real issues here, and we better address them. And this bunch we've got out in Washington right now is unbelievable.
But was there a singular, I got to be honest.
Yes.
I was 2 issues. One is I remember when Al Gore was over in Japan.
Yes.
And he called into the Oval to say, we have a, agreement here, the Kyoto.
Yes.
Obviously, President Clinton moved forward. I was aware of climate change, but I wasn't conscious of climate change. And my own thing was a series of things that built up that
Yes.
they just said, but yours sounds like a revolution, not an evolution.
Oh, it's an evolution,
Is
too.
it an evolution, too?
When you watch the atmosphere day to day, you start seeing things that you think, gee, that is really strange. And I'll tell you what really convinced me there was something going on were these warm pools that I saw developing in the Arctic that buckle the jet stream and have a profound impact on our weather here in the mid-latitudes. Mm-hmm. Hurricane Sandy went into the mid-Atlantic coast instead of following the climatologically favored path out to sea because of one of these warm domes that developed up over Greenland. It effectively was like an atmospheric dam that prevented the storm from going anywhere but right into the mid-Atlantic. Mm-hmm. What's going on in Europe right now?
With the snowstorm, you mean?
Yeah. This may seem counterintuitive to folks. So often whenever it snows or gets cold, people say, hey, where's the global warming now? Mm-hmm. They're confusing weather and climate. Mm-hmm. Or when they throw snowballs on the Senate floor, because there's been a snowstorm in Washington. Mm-hmm. I don't know who ever told them that a warming planet was incapable of producing a cold spell or a snowstorm. And in fact, as we continue warming, the snowstorms can be even more prolific in their snow production because of the fact the atmosphere within which they're occurring holds more water vapor. Every degree Fahrenheit that this planet warms, the atmosphere holds 4% more water. We saw the impact with Harvey in Houston. Never has a tropical cyclone over the term of the instrument record in this country that goes back to the late 1800s produced that level of rain.
These big words with 5 syllables roll off your tongue like nothing else I've ever seen.
I hope it's intelligible.
I'm not playing Scrabble with you. Forget it.
I know.
But go ahead. It's a serious subject. The storm comes over Houston.
Yeah, I mean, to get 60-plus inches of rain, which came down in parts of eastern Texas, that's 35 trillion gallons of water. Look at the flooding in our area. Mm-hmm. Probably the most obvious sign of climate change here is the frequency with which we have flooding rain events here.
Let me interrupt.
Yes.
So I'm going to give you one anecdote. It's going to get me in trouble, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Going all the way back to the Clinton time.
Yes.
I had an argument with Gore. I said, I said to the vice president, I should say Gore. Mm-hmm. I said to the vice president, I said, nobody understands what climate change is. I don't mean to raise my voice here. Yeah. I said, Mr. Vice President, this is like thought up by a bunch of geniuses at the Aspen Institute. Come up with something that we can tell the American people, because climate change sounds like we're at a policy institute debate rather than, I said, talk about erratic weather. Call it something with a better title.
Right.
I said, this will never, I said since we were in the Clinton White House, I said, this dog won't hunt.
Yes.
I was trying to get the president on my side. So how would you if you were going now, and let's say you were back then 20 years ago,
right,
and you had skeptics, which we still have, but I think
we sure do.
Yeah, but the narrative has moved, and there's a consensus building publicly.
Yes.
How do you explain climate change so people kind of understand that it's relevant in their lives? I still think the term has kind of a distant, antiseptic
it does.
policy discussion that only the elite are allowed to understand and accept.
It's interesting that one of my friends who's a researcher at Argonne calls it climate disruption. Climate change essentially...
I'm with him or her, whoever that is.
Yeah. Doug Sisterson over there. And they're doing groundbreaking work in that arena and looking at how we can develop nanotechnology that takes advantage of solar energy that's coming in. I mean, that's the energy source of the future. Look at all the extremes in weather. Climate change is not one extreme. It isn't one heat wave. It isn't one cold wave. It isn't one snowstorm. It's when these things start happening over and over and over again. And nobody can look. I remember a fellow from the Weather Channel at a conference I was at saying, I started writing down all the unusual weather extremes that were going on. He said, before I knew it, I had this list that was volumes long. And I suddenly realized an atmosphere in its normal state wouldn't be doing this with the regularity it is. So I would describe climate change as a collection of extremes on both sides of the ledger in precipitation, both increased frequency of drought and increased frequency of rain, increased instances of heat and cold. Heat, of course, is, as we found out in 1995 here, deadly. It's probably the most deadly phenomenon, and it's insidious because, the death certificates don't say heat-related death. It might be cardiovascular failure or respiratory failure. We saw what it did. It killed 10,000 people in Europe in 2003 and another 50,000 people in 2003 and another 55,000 in 2010. It's been deadly in Australia, in Pakistan, India, go down the list. There were deadly episodes of heat in Europe.
You make this drought thing. I always tell people in 2013, there was 2 days in which we had the reverse of the river is all about depth, and the river actually started flowing the other way. Now, 4 years later, we're within a foot of the highest amount of water, and just in 4 years span, we went from, there was a 3-day period that we were holding our breath here, and then now 4 years later, we're within a foot of the highest water amount ever in the lake.
Look at our lake levels. I mean, there's a cyclicality to them, but it is stunning. What has happened here. I can remember the water washing over Sheridan Road with full-fetched northeast, and Bill Curtis out on Lakeshore Drive when the water came up during the high lake levels in the mid-'80s. Then we went down. We're near the lowest level ever. Now we're back up again. And then, of course, the sea level change. Thank goodness we're not on the coast. I'm reading a book now by a fellow by the name of Jeff Goodell called The Water Will Come. He's an environmental writer for Rolling Stone and among other publications. But he makes the point that with the 3 to 6 feet of sea level change that we're anticipating by the end of the century in Florida, where they don't even allow, some of their politicians don't allow even the word climate change to be invoked, they stand to lose $1 trillion of real estate with a 6-foot sea level rise. It's a shame. It's important that our political leaders be plugged into this and talking about it. And unfortunately, it seems there's only one party that really is doing anything about it.
Today, we're doing this interview on a day I'm recruiting a company that's moving from New York here, and I in some competitions when we get down to cities, I always tell them you can't go to Houston, Miami, New York, Boston. I said there's going to be, and this is also true about on the far West Coast, there is going to be a challenge to those cities
no question.
From rising sea levels and also loss of fresh water.
There is absolutely no question about it. 1 in 8 Florida homes may disappear underwater. Miami, where they continue to build high-rise condominiums, they have what are called king floods. These are sunny-skied floods that occur because of astronomical tides or just the wind direction. And they continue to build these high-rise condos. And the interesting thing is, the construction sites themselves go underwater at times as they're building it. It's really frightening when you start. We'll lose Fort Sumter. We'll lose Cape Canaveral. The Florida Keys are gone by the end of the century if things keep going.
Do the weathermen, I don't know if you guys have an association you ever get together.
Yes.
Is this a topic that you all talk about in the sense of raising awareness and consciousness?
Yes.
It is?
Increasingly. For a long time.
Were you the first canary in the coal mine and then it started building, or?
I don't know that I was the first. There were a lot of people. I mean, I think of Bob Ryan out in Washington, who was an outspoken supporter of climate change research and so forth. Bob was in there early on in the game. I probably came later to the game than some did. But I think there's an increased awareness among the media weather types that this is an issue, and there ought to be. The problem is a lot of us are not educated in climate science. And the problem also is that a lot of the people who raise the objections to climate science and claim it's a hoax and so forth have no atmospheric science background themselves. And this is true of a lot of the people who are the opinion leaders in this climate denial area. The Rush Limbaughs, the Hannitys, the Drudge, the whole bunch. Look at their background. Look at the Pruitt's background. He is a poli-sci degree and a legal degree, and he spent his attorney generalship down in Oklahoma suing the EPA every time something came along. This Myron Ebel, who's a mover and shaker in the Trump administration, he's a climate denier. He has a PhD in philosophy from Oxford. Why are these people even addressing the subject?
Well, this is more political than it is scientifically based. So tell me, when did you know, I think I read this, when did you know you wanted to do a report on the weather? Where's this?
Mayor, I've been interested since I was a little kid. I used to have paper routes, and I dreamed of...
You should have tried baseball. I mean, how did weather grab you versus...
I don't know. My parents couldn't figure out what they had done wrong. It was... I don't know where this came from, but it's been with me ever since I can remember. I just found a fascination with the subject. And the more I go on, the more I realize that what goes on with the atmosphere and the weather reaches into every one of our lives in every conceivable way. And so my interest has only grown. And I've been fortunate enough to be in this career during a 50-year period in which there's been more progress made in meteorology than in all the time back to Aristotle. And it's been fun. My friend, one of my close friends, Louis Uccellini, is head of the Weather Service. Louis was finishing his PhD when I was up in Madison. And I say to him, Louis, can you believe how far we've come with the modeling and all that's done? It's extraordinary. The remote sensing by satellite.
I think you guys are good at 30 years out. It's the next 3 hours that I have some complaints about.
Well, and we're even getting better on that.
Yeah.
We have a breed of numerical model now that addresses the short term, because this is really when a lot of the trouble. We have a model called the HRRR model, which is extraordinary. It goes out 15 hours. They run it hourly. And for instance, the snow pattern coming in tonight. This is invaluable when you've got a storm coming in to be able to see every hour, have some guidance on how things are evolving. Are they on track? Should you pull back on your forecast of snow? We're not perfect, but forecasts today are better than they've ever been before. And this... we often hear from the deniers, you can't tell us what it's going to do tomorrow or a week from now. How do you have the audacity to tell us what's happening? The premise is wrong. We do have great success at telling you about tomorrow, and to take one bad forecast and extrapolate it and say the whole enterprise is crazy. Nate Silver, in his book, The Signal and the Noise, made the point that he looked at forecasting of all different kinds, political, medical, you name it, sports, economic. He said,
forget economics.
Yeah.
Forget about it.
I know.
Right.
We did a seminar up at Northwestern on this.
And you say weather is the best of those professionals?
He says weather forecasting is the one exercise in prediction that actually has shown dramatic improvement, and it's true.
Forget Nate Silver, okay? He was off on the 2016,
I know.
okay?
He was,
That's not exactly
He's
the
lost some
authority.
of his luster, yes.
I think
he
Nate
blew
should go
the
back.
last one.
Nate should go back and work on that master's thesis
That's true.
again. Let me ask you, so what brought you to Chicago? And then I have a second follow-up, but I want to say, did you ever in your wildest imagination know that you would, and this is a positive one I'm going to say, is become an institution? I mean, that you're in and of yourself. No, but you are. I mean,
Mayor, did I ever think that I'd be sitting here in Rahm Emanuel's office talking to the mayor of the city of Chicago?
I don't think a lot of people thought Rahm Emanuel would ever be mayor, so no.
Well, I'll tell you, you are, and I admire your.
Rumor has it.
I admire your stance on making server space available for the scrubbed EPA site climate change information. Yeah. That was pretty impressive.
Well, some of us know how government works. You know, this is a backward-looking administration. I was going to say, like, you're not the only people that have a website, you knuckleheads. I may not know how to turn on my website, how to put anything on it, but I know that I could get somebody to do it for me.
I'll tell you, hats off to you. It's really tremendous you've done that, because this whole idea of blocking the information as a means of controlling people.
Do you know what we're doing next?
What's that?
If you want a paper published on climate disorder or anything like that, give it to us and we'll put it up on our website.
Wow.
So not just data and all that, but
fantastic.
So telling the academics who are working on this that obviously you want to submit it to the EPA, but we don't have an EPA. We're kind of like, I remember when I was in the Obama White House, the most looked website in China was our embassy on smog.
Yes.
Most looked website. And now we've become modeling ourselves after the Chinese government. We block information we don't like.
It's amazing.
So tell me, did you ever think, Tom Scully, you moved to Chicago from Wisconsin.
No,
you're going to do weather that X years later, you would become the sought after. Maybe I should be your agent, negotiate the contract with WGN.
You're very kind.
Did you ever think so?
I'm surprised at the way this career has unfolded. I mean, to be able to do the weather page on the Tribune, I've been able to do things I could only have dreamed about. You know, from a little kid who used to dream about applying his newspaper route holdings to buying a bedroom radar set to where I am today in a profession.
Wait a second. Your newspaper route money was for a radar set?
Well, that was my hope.
Okay. You know, Blue Cross and Blue Shield covers this.
You know, Mayor, I tell young people, be too stupid to know that you're not supposed to be able to do what you want to do and go for it. You know, and that's pretty much the description of my career. I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Don't remember it. My dad was transferred out to New York City. We lived in New Jersey. He did the commute, and then we were transferred out to Aurora in 1965. My dad was transferred, and we've been here ever since. And I realized right away the Midwest was where I was comfortable. I'm not an East Coast person, but I found the weather fascinating. I saw things out here that I'd seen in books that I couldn't see through the smog, which at the time existed out in New Jersey. But no, it's been quite a ride. I pinch myself every day, and I'm so busy doing what I do, and I don't have much time to think about it, to tell you the truth.
You have a passion for it, which is what I always tell that to students. I say, figure out what's your passion. And
exactly.
We keep giving this lecture, but they think they have to follow something else that's preset. And if you find what is a passion,
it's how true.
That the thing is, you know, and I say this to you in the sense of what on the environmental policy.
Yes.
I always try to remind students and others, we've actually been successful. You talked about smog. I talk about when I was growing up on Lake Michigan. You used to have to run into the water, dive underneath all the dead fish that were washing in. Go swim, hold your breath as a minimum 30 to 40 feet, then pop up past the dead fish. And today, while we have challenges on invasive species, and we still have challenges,
yes,
our Environment Clean Water Act worked.
It absolutely
what we did on mercury, on the atmosphere, worked.
It did.
And then we can handle climate disorder, climate change. We can handle it if we're willing to apply the political will to solve it.
Well, the Montreal Protocol, which addressed chlorofluorocarbon propellants that were destroying the ozone layer, we've taken those out. We did that first in this country. And what's really frustrating is the new jobs are in the clean energy sector. You know, they're doing amazing work at Argonne Labs on using nano solar collectors embedded within windows. We'll one day look through our windows that are collecting solar energy.
That's right.
The Chinese are eating our lunch with solar conductors or solar panels. The French are eating our lunch.
That's the past. Because what you said is right. The windows on a building, a home, that's going to be the new energy source.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's free. It doesn't pollute. And it's abundant and available. And look, the number of solar energy jobs in this country tripled between 2010 and 2016. In the last year, the biggest growth in the energy sector, 44% of it, came in clean fuel technologies.
We have more people now in solar and wind than in coal.
Exactly. And so this notion that you have to reinvent the coal industry, heck, what are they going to do? Bring the blacksmiths back?
Can I tell you why I admire you?
Yeah.
No, seriously. First of all, I want to thank you for when I had all the mayors from around the world here for other
That
climate.
was wonderful.
It was.
Thank you for hosting that. That was great. And work with the Bloomberg people.
A lot of people in your profession stay in their lane, don't take a risk because they think it's not good for their career, not good for their profession. And I know you get challenged, and people throw political jabs at you, that you willingly continue to speak out. As obviously, since I can't get a word in edgewise around here.
I'm sorry about that.
I'm joking with you.
I know.
But on an issue that then somehow paints you political and you haven't backed down, and I'm not sure what the management at GN and Tribune say, but I admire you for being willing to stick to your guns and not say, okay, I'll stay with the weather and tomorrow, here's what's coming Monday morning. That you've spoken out on an issue and you're not going to back down, and I admire your political steadfastness.
I'll tell you something, and right back at you with the steps you've taken on so many different fronts that aren't necessarily popular or the ones that will bring us the most support. But I'll tell you something. I'm 66 years old. If at this point, I feel sorry for the young people. I understand their reticence to get in front of this. And I wonder in our own place, we've got new owners coming in. Who knows what they'll think about my stance on climate change. But
don't worry, there'll be a lot of us at the doors if they try to mess with you, Tom. Okay, I'll organize that. You got that for me. Okay,
well,
we'll organize that for you.
I intend to continue speaking about it. I'm telling you, the people in our profession that are doing the work in this arena are so incredible. One of the great joys of my job has been to introduce people to others who are behind the scenes in our profession, but are the shoulders on which the rest of us stand. The Don Wubbles at the University of Illinois, so many other researchers. Jim Hansen was in town at Benedictine University last year. He sat before Congress in the 1980s. He had the Bush administration trying to edit his work and going to his bosses at NASA trying to muzzle him. And then the New York Times got wind of that and exposed it. We've got to stand up and talk. This is too important a subject. And the evidence is too overwhelming. As Don says, this from a climate researcher, a Nobel Prize. He said, this is one of these stories for which there isn't another side. This story, we in the media always talk about giving both sides of the story. There isn't another side to this story. Climate change is happening. It has profound implications to this country, and it also has the possibility of being the source of new jobs.
Well, that's the key where leadership comes in public policy or in elected office, is how do you take a challenge and make it an opportunity?
Yes.
And your point is, if you look at climate change and not make it a threat to people but an opportunity, you can shift the debate, which is actually from Kyoto to Paris is what I think has been the transition. And I actually do believe, going back to my discussion with the Vice President Gore, your role, people that are comfortable, familiar, people don't see you political, speaking out, helps shift that debate and then build a consensus where none existed before.
I think the average person today is pretty busy trying to put a roof over their head, their families' heads, and put food on the table and figure out how they're going to educate their young people with these crippling tuitions that young people pay for college.
We have an answer for that in Chicago.
Yes, I know you do.
The Chicago Star Scholarship.
I know you do.
Be average free.
Stunningly good development.
Oh, well,
yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yes, you have been on that right away. But I ask my young people what they're paying for college tuition.
It is insane.
It is.
What we've done to access to a better future.
It is. And then we send them out into the world with a crippling debt that they'll spend the rest of their lives trying to get on top of it. And not even with a guarantee of a job in some cases.
Well,
it's we've got to do something about it. Maybe instead of bombing mountaintops in Afghanistan. Maybe we ought to stay at home and figure out,
I never knew that of all my interviews, Tom Skilling was going to be the most politically
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
I know.
All right, ready?
Yes.
This is going to be your proof of your roots here.
Okay.
Okay. Cubs or Sox?
Oh, gosh. You know what?
Cubs or
This will
Sox?
sound like I'm
Yeah.
both. I love them both.
You are running for office, Skilling.
I have White Sox roots.
Thick or thin pizza?
Oh, my God.
These aren't that hard, man.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I love them both. Can't you see? I didn't get this physique out of being selective.
You could be the first person I interview who's both on ever. Okay, lake or river?
Lake or river? Gosh, I hadn't thought about that.
Okay. I'm moving faster.
I love them both.
Okay, I love them both. Okay.
I love Lake Michigan. I think our lakefront.
I love you, Tom. I've let no person off on these. I made
you're being very easy on me.
Hancock or Sears, and I refuse to now go to the new names of either one.
I know.
Now this is becoming
It
political.
will always be the Hancock and the Sears to me. I'm sorry.
So which one? Stick with both.
I love the Hancock.
Love the Hancock. You're willing to go.
I think it's a beautiful building.
You wouldn't go on Lake or River. You wouldn't go on Cumberland Sox, but you're going to go. You've decided to put your foot firmly on Hancock versus Sears.
I do. And we did a program on Sears.
Which one do you love to see the city from?
Oh, well, the Sears Tower view is just incredible. Okay. Do you know the sun rises earlier up there and sets later? The days are actually longer.
I knew that. I was just waiting for you to say that in this show. Okay.
The days are actually longer up there. And it must be wild to be in one of those law offices.
Wait, the day is longer?
Yeah.
On the Sears Tower?
Yeah, on the top. Yeah.
How come I've been here 7 years and I never knew that?
It may be the variation we calculated, maybe 2 or 3 minutes longer out there because the sun breaks the horizon, which is the definition of sunrise.
I could have used.
Sooner.
I'm going to take my next SAT test up there. I could have used those 3 minutes.
Sure.
Okay, I never finished the science section.
Yeah, it's amazing.
All right, 12-inch, 16-inch softball.
Oh gosh, I think
Tom,
12-inch.
these aren't that hard. They're just.
I know.
All right, if you were assigning reading on the topic of weather, climate, what it means to our economy, society.
Tell you one book.
Give me the book. Hold on one second.
All right.
Give it.
How to Change Minds on Our Changing Climate. It's done by, and this is authored by Doug Sisterson and Seth Darling, Dr. Seth Darling, both of Argonne Labs. How to Change Minds on Our Changing Climate. This addresses all the myths that are thrown at any one of us by climate deniers. And it does it eloquently, articulately, and just beautifully.
I'm sticking with climate disorder.
Yes.
Something that vernacular people can get.
Yeah.
Tom Skilling, don't worry, we're busting through in the Sinclair, when they all meet the shareholders, we're standing up for you.
Thank you.
I have a sinking suspicion this could be your last contract.
Jeez, I know. Well, I got a couple of years to run on it, although I got some outs on it. But look, you've got to speak your mind. I mean, if we don't talk about it, who's going to?
You're the best. This is why I wanted to have
Mayor,
you on here.
A real pleasure to meet you, and I'll tell you, have a chance to talk with you.
Tom Skilling.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much.
You're listening to Chicago Stories with Mayor Emanuel. You can subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts and tweet your guest ideas using #ShyStories. Thanks for listening.